Alright, this is how to add custom blocks to your Amethyst mod. First, inside of the source directory, let's make a new folder and let's call it blocks. Now, let's make a new header called mod blocks and also a new source file called mod blocks. Inside of the header, let's add pragma once and let's make a new class. Let's call it mod blocks. Inside, let's add a new static function, static void register mod blocks, and let's take in the register blocks event. Let's add an include amethyst runtime events register events. Let's open up a new terminal and type out xmake project -k vsxmake. Now let's go back into Visual Studio, reload the project and open up the mod blocks header. Hover over this function, show potential fixes and generate the definition. We need to add an include for the block type registry, include Minecraft source common world level block registry block type registry. Second, let's also add an include for block legacy. It's in Minecraft source common world level block legacy. Inside of block type registry, we want to call the register block function. For this, we need to pass in a template. For this, we're going to use block legacy. Block legacy is essentially Minecraft's simplest type of block. Let's go into the block legacy header and find the constructor. We need to pass in a name, a numerical ID, and the material to use. We just need to use the mod's namespace followed by its name. To get the ID, we need to add a new include Minecraft source common world level block definition group. Now we can pass in ev.blockDefinitions.get next block ID. Next, we need to pass in a material. To get an existing material, we can do material get material, and let's pass in material type. Let's just use dirt. Now assign the material to a variable and let's pass it in. Now let's hook up the register mod blocks event. Inside of dll main.c++, let's add a new include blocks/mod blocks. Now to the bus, let's add bus.addListener register blocks event and let's pass in the mod blocks function. Compile your mod. Now go and load into a world. To test if your block is registered correctly, let's run a command. We can use the /setBlock command. Let's do it at the current position. And when you start typing in your namespace, you should see that your block comes up in the list here. Let's run the command and you can see the block is in the world. If we go into the creative inventory, scroll all the way down, we can see that the block is not here. So let's add a block item. Let's go back into the mod blocks header and let's add a new function. Let's call it static void register block items. We need to pass in the register items event and let's call it ev. Now inside of the mod block source file, let's do void mod blocks register block items and pass in the event. We need to add a new include for block item. It's in Minecraft source common world item block item. Alright, to register our block item, we need to first keep a weak pointer to our block legacy that we register here. To do that, let's go into the mod blocks header and let's first add an include to the block legacy header, and in here let's add a static weak pointer to block legacy and let's call it mtest block. Inside of register mod blocks, we need to assign mtest block. To register the block item, we can do ev.item registry. We need to add a new include. Now let's call register item shared and let's use the block item class. Let's go into the header to see what it takes to construct a block item. We can see that it takes a name, a numerical ID, and the name of the block to use. We can do mtestBlock name info.mfullname.getString. To get the numerical ID, we can do mtestBlock and we can call get block item ID. Lastly, for the name of the block, we can do mtestBlock mnameinfo.mfullname. Now let's try and register our item to the creative inventory. We can do auto construction tab and we can do ev.mCreativeItemRegistry get vanilla category, and here we pass in the creative item category that we want to use, and for this let's use construction. Inside of construction tab, let's call add creative item, and here we can pass in a block legacy. So what we can do is dereference mtestBlock. Let's call this function inside of dll main. Let's add a new listener once again to the register items event, and let's call mod blocks register block items. And just before we build the mod, we need to go and initialize mtestBlock here. Let's go into the source file for mod blocks and let's initialize mtestBlock. We can do weak pointer block legacy and it's in the mod block class mtestBlock equals null pointer. Now let's build the mod. If we open up the creative inventory, let's go to the construction tab. We can now see that our block is here. We can finally take it out and we can place it. Now let's give our block a visual. To add a texture, let's go into Visual Studio Code. To add a texture, let's go into data, packs, rp, textures, and inside of the textures folder, if you cloned the template repo before this tutorial, there'll be a link to this file in the description. Otherwise, inside of the template, you should see a new file called terrain textures. For now, just close this file, and inside of textures blocks, we can insert a texture here. If you have a texture that you want to use for your block, just drag it in now. And we can also remove the .gitkeep file. I've already pre-made a texture I'm going to use. The name that the file has is important. This will be the identifier of the texture that it's going to use. Let's go back into Visual Studio Code. Inside of mod mod blocks, add a new function called init block graphics, and it should take in the init block graphics event. Let's create a definition of this function. And to register your block graphics, first, let's include the block's graphics class. Let's go include Minecraft, force client, common, client, renderer, block graphics. And so to set up the visuals for our block graphics, we can get an instance of block graphics. We can make a block graphics pointer, test block graphics equals block graphics, create block graphics. We need to pass in an identifier for our block and the block shape we want to use. For this first parameter, let's pass in mTestBlock, mNameInfo, mFullName. And for our block, let's just make it a simple cube shape. We can do block shape block. Off of test block graphics, we can call the setTextureItem function. We can pass in our mod's namespace, followed by the identifier of the texture. In my case, I saved the file as test_block. So I'll need to pass in the same string here, and then we can call test block graphics set default carried textures. And let's add a new listener inside DLL main. Add listener init block graphics event, and let's pass in mod blocks init block graphics. Whilst that's building, let's go into Visual Studio Code, and we'll need to rebuild the resource pack. To do that, run the command cd data, and we can run rgl watch, and you should now see that your block has a texture. Finally, let's add some logic to the block. Let's run the function whenever the player stands on top of the block. Inside of mod blocks, let's add a new class. Let's call it class test block, and we can make it inherit from block legacy. We need to add a constructor. Let's just pass in the same parameters that block legacy does. Now let's go into the block legacy header, and let's find the onStandOn function. We can copy this, paste it into the header. Let's mark it as an override, and inside of this function, let's just log something to the console, onStandOn. Instead of registering using block legacy here, let's replace it with our new test block class. Now rebuild the mod, and now just load into your world, and because I logged out standing on the block, you can now see that it's printing onStandOn to the console. We can see that it's running on both the client thread and also the server thread. If you have any issues getting this working, feel free to join the Amethyst Discord. That's all there is in this tutorial. Have a great day, and goodbye.